Hello there. Welcome into a Monday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, or you're listening on the Extra Sports 1300 app, which is sponsored by Diversus Health, Mental Health, and Well-Being for All. It will be a veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours. You don't have to tune in for all of them. It would mean a lot to me if you did. But just know that I'll be here until 6 o'clock. We got Nuggets Warriors coming up on the station tonight. If you'd like to weigh in on any of the day's topics, you know what to do. Text or call it in at 719-247-1313. You can also hit me up on X at Gingerly Tweets. Now, get into the Mikko Rantanen of it all from yesterday in a little bit, because I want to talk about the consequence of that game and the game itself yesterday before we get into all the, touchy-feely, mushy stuff from yesterday. Let's talk about the hardcore hockey stuff here. That would have been probably the worst loss of the Avs season yesterday. Would have been. Wasn't. Thanks to Cale Makar for throwing on his cape and bailing them out in overtime. With everything going on with Mikko Rantanen's return, the fact that the Avs and the Stars are battling for home ice in what seems to be an inevitable first-round matchup between these two teams, and to have dominated that hockey game the way that the Avs did, for them to lose that game, it would have been a disaster. But they won. And they needed to win that game, even if it goes to a shootout. And you know where I stand on shootouts. I basically just zone out or turn off the TV. I could not care less how shootouts go in the NHL. But if that game would have gone to a shootout, I would have been locked in. Whether it's overtime or the shootout, the Avs had to find a way to pull out that game. That would have been the gut punch of all gut punches to lose that game. But they didn't. And kudos to them for finding a way to ultimately win that hockey game. And within it, you get a glimpse of what a series between these two teams is going to look like, as if you need another reminder. We just had these two teams in the playoffs. Now, the Avs are constituted a bit differently, right? Stars have at least one significant new piece, but the head coaches are the same. The systems are the same. You saw what a series between these two teams is going to look like. Look, I don't know, and in fact, I would, if I know anything, I would say that I know that the Avs are not going to dominate even the majority of games in a series against Dallas the way they did yesterday. I'm pretty certain of that. But the style of play, the way that game went, was reminiscent of a playoff game. The atmosphere, certainly, it was a playoff atmosphere at Ball Arena. And you look at the goals that were scored in that game. For Colorado, they get a redirect on the first goal. Marty Necas standing right in front of the net. Another one, Brock Nelson completely screened out Jake Ottinger. There was no way Ottinger could have seen that puck. The Drouin one was an absolute snipe, which sometimes you got to be perfect, right? And then the last one was Cale Makar being one of the 5 best players on planet Earth. Those, however many goals the Avs are going to score in a series against Dallas, they're going to probably fall into one of those groups. Jake Ottinger is not Connor Hellebuck. Okay, the playoff version of Jake Ottinger is better than the regular season version. Right? So there's no banking on, well, Jake Ottinger's not going to be what he was on Sunday. Oh, yes, he will be. 100% he will be. He might be better. Who knows? That Drouin snipe, he may glove out of the air in a playoff series. So there's no, well, Jake Ottinger can't possibly play. Yeah, he can. He can. He could be better. But those, especially the first couple of goals, I think are really how the Avs are going to need to score goals against Dallas in the playoffs. And having a big body centerman like Brock Nelson certainly helped. A guy not afraid, and you could view this as perhaps part of the reason why Chris McFarland was okay making a Mikko Rantanen for Marty Necas swab. If there's one negative to Mikko Rantanen, he does like to camp out a little bit, not in front of goal. Now, if you're a player like Mikko Rantanen, you would have the utmost confidence that you could score a goal from the slot. But net front presence, manufacturing goals, dirty goals, getting in the dirty areas, that's how you score in the playoffs. Even for a team as talented as the Avs, they're going to have to get grimy and gritty to beat Jake Ottinger in a 7-game postseason series. So I thought the way that the Avs scored their goals was really good. Because you're not going to have time and space. You're not going to be able to dazzle all the time. The 3-on-3 nonsense in overtime, that doesn't exist. So you got to get in front of the net. You got to redirect shots. You got to screen out the goalie, and the Avs did that. And then on the other side for Dallas, those 2 goals that ultimately tied the game, they were off of Avalanche mistakes, which we know that the Achilles heel, if you will, of the Avs, or the way they have usually been beat in the playoffs, whether it be in any particular game or a series, is by teams taking advantage of their mistakes. Right? That's part of playoff hockey as well. And it's not, I'm not diminishing Dallas at all when I say that, because it takes an elite team to punish you for every mistake. You know how many mistakes the Avs made in that hockey game? Like 3. They dominated the game. They made like 3 mistakes, and 2 of them ended up in the back of the net. So the Avs' downfall in particular games or series in the playoffs the last couple of years have been because of their opponent's ability to make them pay for their mistakes, even if they are few and far between. Now, one of those mistakes feels a little freakish, right? You try to clear the puck, it hits off a referee, and that's what ultimately keeps it in the zone. But in the playoffs, you got to clear that puck. I don't care what's in front of you. You got to get that puck out. You just do. So, as rare as mistakes were yesterday for the Avs, Dallas capitalized on multiple Avs mistakes. And that's how they're going to get a fair amount of their goals in this upcoming playoff series. So I thought it was very indicative and a good precursor to what we're going to see in the playoffs. And if you follow the Avs, none of what I just said should shock you. None of this is a revelation. Again, we just saw two teams with different personnel, but same head coaches, same system, same style of play, go up against each other before. So what you saw yesterday was more than any kind of revelation, was just more of a refresher. And like, oh yeah, this is how playoff hockey works. This is how playoff hockey against Dallas works. I think what yesterday was, setting aside the extracurricular Mikko Rantanen stuff, is just about, can this team with so much new in it play that way and win that way? Because you have to be connected, right? To limit your mistakes, knowing that elite teams are going to pounce on every mistake that you make. To be able to play a more grinded out, close game, you got to be a tight-knit group. You got to be able to work together. And that's my biggest concern with this Avalanche team, is whether they can get on that kind of page together in time and consistently throughout 20 some odd games. So yesterday was a nod that maybe it is possible. And that's why you get out to the lead that the Avs did. You know, the first period has been a bit of an issue for them. Yesterday was exactly why it's so important to get out to a lead. Because when you do that, you can absorb the counterpunch, right? The counterpunch from Dallas wasn't going to overtake the Avs. Then you can recover like the Avs did, and you can take it back like they did in overtime. To not have to chase games, especially against that Dallas team. That is not a team that you want to fall behind, for many of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So the Avs needed to come back and win that game. They needed to answer back, and they did. Now, keep in mind, Miro Heiskanen. That's a thing, right? He changes a lot. And I think a lot of the reason why you saw the Avs dominate that game the way they did was because of the absence of Miro Heiskanen. And I think he inevitably becomes the biggest X factor. If he's healthy, the Avs aren't going to have as easy of a time entering the Dallas zone. They're not going to be able to dominate the game. Doesn't mean that he ultimately tips the scales in Dallas's favor. But before I go on the record on whether I think Dallas or Colorado would win a 7-game series, I got to know what his status is. I got to know if he's healthy. Because if he's not, then maybe the Avs can beat Dallas in a 7-game series. But I think he's the thing you have to find out between now in this series is what's his status. Is he 100%? Because clearly he changes things for Dallas. Still a really good team. Still a team that the Avs would be in for a long series with and could still ultimately lose to. You saw that, right? You got a glimpse of that in that third period that, like Dallas, when their desperation level goes up, like they can come back on you. And part of me, just thinking about this, Part of me thinks that I think there was more downside yesterday than upside for the Avs. Really. And I don't know if that's totally fair. And maybe it's influenced heavily by the way that the game turned out and the fact that Avs jumped out to the lead and Dallas came back and it was like, well, the Avs have to win now. But to me, it's almost like if Dallas wins that game, then you're like, see, Avs aren't ready. And even with the Avs winning, I still have questions about whether they could beat Dallas in a 7-game series. But from what I saw yesterday, certainly you can say that this team is under no misconception of what it will take to beat Dallas. They know what it takes to beat Dallas and Jake Ottinger. And the fact that they were able to ultimately come back and win that game, certainly much better than the other potential result. But we're going to get this. As Cale Makar said, it's inevitable.
I think it's inevitable. I think it's we got to meet, and I think we match up. It's going to be an incredibly hard series if it comes to that, and they're a super deep team, and we've added so much depth too. So, yeah, again, it's going to be games like tonight, very tight checking and not a lot of scoring opportunities, but you got to find ways to capitalize, and that's what they did at the end there. But yeah, we got lucky at that.
Or they had Cale Makar. Because the only person that would characterize the Avs winning on a Cale Makar goal as lucky would be Cale Makar. No, Cale, you're just that good. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the Avs win. We will get into the Mikko Rantanen of it all. And guess who is skating with a little bit of fervor today out at Avs practice? We'll get to that coming up in a little bit. Coming up next, though, we are now to our second Nuggets crash out of the season. Think you have the luck of the Irish? Enter to win our pot full of cash. So this will be a St. Paddy's Day you'll never forget with $5,000 in our Luck of the Irish giveaway, sponsored locally by Triple Crown Casinos. Head to extrasports1300.com now to enter this national contest for your chance to win. Now, there are few opponents in the world that can make the reality of a team come crashing down around them. For the Denver Nuggets, it has become clear that that team is the Washington Wizards. Just the night before, Friday night, as poorly as the Nuggets played against a Luka and LeBron-less Lakers team, needing essentially the reversal of that 2009 Western Conference Finals Game 1 when Anthony Carter couldn't inbound the ball against the Lakers. All these years later, a reversal of fortune, albeit on a much smaller stage. But Russell Westbrook stole an inbound, dunked the ball, it sealed the game. Nuggets win. And what did Michael Malone do after that game? Crumpled up the box score and threw it in the trash. And said, this isn't a beauty pageant. We don't get rated on our wins. It's a win. Okay? But then just one night later, same effort, same poor execution, but a different result thanks to Jordan Poole. Michael Malone in a little bit different of a mood.
We can't keep saying the same thing after every game. And we got lucky last night to beat the Lakers. We got lucky to beat a team that was, severely limited in terms of their normal rotation. And tonight we didn't get lucky. And so if you're going to be a team that's going to be try to stay out of that play-in and be relevant, we got to start playing some defense. We got to stop turning the ball over. We got to start rebounding. I mean, it's game 67, and I've been saying the same things the whole year. So hopefully we can find a way to do that come our next game in San Francisco.
Before we move on, can I highlight something that Michael Malone just mentioned in the middle of that there? If we want to stay out of the play-in, think about that. No matter what you thought of the Nuggets going into this year, or what you thought of the Nuggets at any point up until now, the thought that the Nuggets could be a play-in team was not even remotely in your headspace. But because how congested the West is, mathematically, it's absolutely possible. And given the fact of the Nuggets' effort in really, let's go back the last 3 games, that's why I say the reality is crashing down around the Denver Nuggets right now. They're talking about just staying out of the play-in at this point. They did get lucky against the Lakers. And actually, Michael Malone really should have said what you just heard there after the Laker game. Right? If it's the same story, it was the same story the night before, why didn't you say that after the Laker game? That effort level, that execution level wasn't nearly where it needed to be. Tell me the difference, really, really and truly. If you take LeBron and Luka Doncic off of the Lakers, who's the better team, LA or Washington? I mean, really think about it and understand that Washington now has Chris Middleton and Marcus Smart. See what I did there with the Boston accent? Like, really? Your best player's Austin Reeves? That Laker team without Luka and LeBron is akin to the Washington Wizards, who are slightly improved given the veterans that they have brought in. Neither team is even in the same universe as the Denver Nuggets from a talent perspective. But yet it took every fiber of their being and a big mistake by the Lakers for the Nuggets to win, for us not to be sitting here and talking about the Nuggets losing both of these games. I'm seeing, and I just mentioned it with the play-in. And look, I think that the Nuggets will not be in the play-in. I'll just go on the record there. I think Michael Malone getting in his feelings a little bit. I think the Nuggets will ultimately remain outside of the play-in. But I've seen a lot about, this drops the Nuggets to third or it drops them to fourth. And now that is, we're done with the seeding talk. Except for the play-in. If the Nuggets fall down to the play-in, that's a different issue, right? Because you're playing one or two games for your season. Okay, but as long as the Nuggets are above the play-in, I thought we abandoned that we care what seed the Nuggets get. Or better yet, not that we don't care, that we don't want Michael Malone to care. Right? Wasn't that all of what last year was? That he was going too hard, riding Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray into the ground, trying to get the best seed possible? I thought we abandoned. Who cares what seed the Nuggets get? As long as they're outside the play-in, who cares? Because the bigger issue here is whether they're good enough to advance through the playoffs. Should we really be in the business of nitpicking which matchup would be better for the Denver Nuggets? With the best player on planet Earth, we're back to 5 years ago, Denver Nuggets, where we're trying to get them to manipulate the standings so they get an easier first round. What are we doing here? The bigger question is whether the Nuggets are just good enough to advance through the postseason. I don't care if they're fourth. I mean, I don't want them to play Minnesota, but guess what? They very may well get the Minnesota Timberwolves in the first round. I don't care if they're 1, 2, or 3, or 4. It's beyond the point, because the question that we have to ask, once again, taking a cue from Michael Malone and how we're talking about the same thing over and over and over again with this basketball team, are they good enough? Who cares if they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Are they good enough to get through the Western Conference playoffs, to say nothing of how they would fare against either Boston or Cleveland? The Nuggets shouldn't be going all in for any seed. But back-to-back games against shorthanded Lakers and the Wizards at home should be easy chalk-em-up victories. They shouldn't need to push Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic to their physical limit in order to beat these teams. That's the point. The seeding will work itself out if you take care of business. If you beat the teams you're supposed to beat, you'll end up in a decent enough spot in terms of home court in the first round. But they very nearly lost to the Lakers the other night, and then they lose to the Wizards. Those are the easy W's you're supposed to get. And they didn't get it on Saturday, and they very nearly didn't get one on Friday. And to Michael Malone's point, they haven't been good enough defensively for a significant stretch of time all year. And I'm not going to go back. You know why I think they're not as good defensively. You know why I think that. I don't need to restate myself. But the fact that they aren't good enough defensively keep showing up. And it showed up in the most important games of the year: Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, Minnesota. That last, not Friday night's Lakers game, but the one where they did have LeBron and Luka. So it's showing up in these marquee games against other elite teams, and now it's showing up even against the teams in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. At a time of year, it would be one thing if this was November, right? Because that was the last time that we had a similar conversation about the Nuggets losing to the Washington Wizards. How could this happen? And all these big questions about where the Nuggets were going. But to be fair to that situation, that was November. We're into March. It's time to go. And then the last week, they've been boat raced by Minnesota. They've eked out a win against a severely shorthanded Lakers side, and then they lose to the Wizards. Which, just saying it, I don't even have to tell you who's on the Washington Wizards. Just hearing that they lost to the Wizards, it's automatically bad. And it should be that way. Just saying it sounds embarrassing. Maybe that's what will get the Nuggets going here. Because I kind of thought last time that we were starting to see it. What happened? They lost to Washington in D.C. At that point, they were 11-10. Certainly not lighting the world on fire. What'd they do after that? They won, what? 17-6. They went after that. And you thought, okay, learning. Nope. Here we are again, talking about a loss to the Wizards and wondering how good this Nuggets team is. This is the time of year where the Nuggets, as opposed to November, this is the time of year when the Nuggets should be playing their best, right? And they're not. And as Nikola Jokic says, they're running out of time.
Like we cannot have that comfort zone that we can just gonna go in a playoff because I think we are not playing good. I think we are lucky that we are third or whatever we are standing, or we are not playing good. But hopefully we're gonna figure it out somehow or not.
Or not. I mean, we could figure it out, or we won't. Now, Nikola Jokic went on to say that he doesn't believe that a switch can be flipped. Right? Who you are in the regular season is who you are in the playoffs. Now, for the Nuggets' sake, I hope he's wrong, and I do slightly disagree with that assertion from Nikola Jokic. Because I think there is kind of a switch that the Nuggets can flip here. And I thought they flipped it after the last time they lost to the Wizards, but clearly they didn't. The switch that needs to be flipped is the one that turns on the light bulb that this team is not as good as they were 2 years ago. We've been saying it all throughout the year, all throughout the offseason, all throughout this season. The Nuggets are not better than they were 2 years ago, but they carry themselves like they are. And meanwhile, the path that they have to get to a championship is more difficult than it was 2 years ago. Now, I'm not one to disparage the road that the Nuggets took. At the time, it was as difficult of a path as you could argue they would be able to take. But look at how much the landscape has changed. Minnesota is much different than they were 2 years ago. The Lakers are much different than they were 2 years ago. Phoenix isn't even in the picture anymore. Now you replace them with Oklahoma City. who's way better than Phoenix ever was. And you think they're going to get the Miami Heat coming out of the Eastern Conference? They're not as good, and the rest of the West is better. So the switch that they need to flip, and maybe if they could flip that switch, everything else will fall into place. They have to understand that they're just flat out not better than they were 2 years ago. Nikola Jokic is, but nobody else on this team can raise their hand and say they're better than they were 2 years ago. Maybe Christian Brown just because he has a bigger role. But on the whole, which is what matters, the Nuggets aren't better than they were 2 years ago. So that's what you cling to if you're a Nuggets fan, is that crashing out for the second time in one season and being swept by the Washington freaking Wizards is enough to wake them up, because once wasn't enough. They looked like they had figured it out shortly thereafter, and then they went right back. Maybe the second time around it'll sink in. But this is the last stretch, and Michael Malone talked about it. This is the last stretch of really significant games kind of in close proximity to one another that the Nuggets have. They have Golden State tonight, and think about how different Golden State is now that they've added Jimmy Butler. So you have them. You also have the Lakers on the road. We'll see whether LeBron or Luka play in that game. And then you have Houston, a team that, by the way, last time the Nuggets played them, Houston routed them. And right now, Houston's the number 2 seed in the West. And then coming up on April 1st, you got your final matchup with Minnesota before perhaps it could be like the Avalanche yesterday. It could be a playoff preview on April 1st at Ball Arena with Minnesota coming in. And you know how that last matchup with Minnesota went. I don't know. I as down as I've been on this basketball team this season, I feel like I'm slightly more optimistic than Nikola Jokic is, which is a scary thought. Speaking of thoughts, scary or otherwise, I'll take them at 719-24-7-1313. Coming up next, it takes something truly unique in order for me to engage in the type of discussion that goes on the day after the NCAA tournament bracket is released. But what happened yesterday is that unique circumstance that I will get engaged in the snub talk. That's next here on Extra Sports 1300. Nuggets swept by the Washington Wizards. Even Kaz on the call could not believe that he was uttering those words. You'll hear that call coming up in a little bit. Let's go to the text line here at 719-247-1313. This comes in from Aaron. If the Nuggets draw Minnesota, they'll lose in 5. The Wolves have their number. And I don't fault you for feeling that way. And it may just be this for the Denver Nuggets. There may only be 2 teams in the West that could beat the Nuggets in a 7-game series. Rockets just got here. Memphis, we'll see. The Lakers, I don't know that everything will click with LeBron and Luka in half a season. It could just be Oklahoma City and Minnesota. That could literally be it. The only 2 teams in the West that can actually beat the Nuggets in a 7-game series. But one of 2 potential scenarios is starting to emerge. Scenario number 1 is that the Nuggets get the Wolves right out of the gate in round 1. And the other scenario is the Nuggets get the Wolves in round 2 after they advance past the Rockets. And then what do they have outside of that? And then you have Oklahoma City looming in the Western Conference Final, more than likely. Or you match up with Oklahoma City earlier. If you end up being it might just be those 2 teams. But with the Dallas and Colorado in the NHL, I'm still kind of on the fence a little bit. I think I'm leaning more towards taking Dallas in a 7-game series, but I'm certainly not there yet. With the Nuggets against Minnesota and the Nuggets against OKC, I don't know. I think I would be more confident that the Nuggets would lose to either of those 2 teams. I have more optimism for the Colorado Avalanche. Because really the only thing that I have as a hesitation, well, two things. One, it's all the new with the Avs. Right? But that doesn't say something about, that they're inferior to anybody in the West. And then the other part is, if we're talking about Dallas, you would have to give them the nod in goal. Right? Mackenzie Blackwood, as brilliant as he's been, he's never played in a playoff game. So that's one part of the equation that you would have to definitely give Dallas. And then you work your way off of that. And whether that ultimately would decide a 7-game series. With the Nuggets, it's always been the defense. It's always been the defense. I don't care that they don't shoot as many threes as other teams. It doesn't even bother me as much that no one helps out Nikola Jokic, although there are plenty of times where Nikola Jokic seems to be going into a game all by his lonesome. The biggest issue is the defensive end of the floor. If you're going to be this alternative to normal NBA programming, and you're not going to take the amount of threes that everybody else does for whatever reason, that's fine. But you also need to be able to defend those. Right? They don't have to conform to the rest of the NBA when it comes to shooting threes. Sure, I'd like a couple more a game. I think there are players capable of that. But on the whole, I'm all right with the Nuggets' offensive style of play because Nikola Jokic. Why would you not play the way that the Nuggets play offensively when you have the best player in the world? But defending the three, that's something they have not done. And Michael Malone talked about it. Last year, they were eighth. This year, they're in the 20s. A precipitous drop-off in their perimeter defense. Personnel's different. Aaron Gordon, do we have to start wondering what Aaron Gordon's going to look like in the playoffs? He's missed a lot of time this year. And they haven't had him for some of these big games or some of these bad losses. At what point do we wonder if they're going to get 100% of Aaron Gordon? The one guy on this team that you could count on defensively, and if he's less than 100%, a lot of questions. And I think, look, this is not just being a prisoner of the moment because of what happened this weekend. But this weekend serves as a microcosm for the season that even when you get kind of down on the Avs, they pull through, right? Early in the season. We know the issues that were plaguing them. Chris McFarland goes out and completely replaces the goaltending room. Even when you're a little bit down, after the Mikko Rantanen trade. Overall, they've played pretty well. You see their record over the last, 10 games or so since Valeri Nichushkin came back. They haven't lost in regulation. So anytime you look to, sell the Avs, they do something, yesterday included, that pulls you back in and says, hang on, don't give up on us yet. And conversely, you have the Nuggets where every time you want to buy in, right? And that was as recently as, the win they got against Oklahoma City early last week. All right, I'm ready to buy back in. They get boat raced by Minnesota, eke by the Lakers without LeBron or Luka, and lose to the Wizards. That's really the difference between these two teams. The Avalanche will always seem to find a way to pull you back in and to make you feel like, don't give up on us yet. And the Nuggets, every time you want to buy back in, they're like, we're going to lose to the Wizards. 719-247-1313. I do want to get into the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about Mikko Rantanen's return. You'll hear from Mikko Rantanen, and I want to take your thoughts on how we proceed forward with Mikko Rantanen as a seems to be permanent member of the Dallas Stars. So all that coming up in hour 2 here on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on this Monday. Glad to have you. Ryan Kaufman with you. Shouts to those of you watching the show today, or really shouts to those of you who watch the show any day on our social media platforms at XTRA Sports 1300, Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. I kept hearing this word a lot watching the Avalanche and Stars yesterday. Closure. I think there was a feeling like we all collectively needed to get to this first Avs-Stars game with Mikko Rantanen on the Stars. Just get there, get it done, get it over with, and move on with the rest of our respective lives. I don't know if yesterday served as the closure that some might think it is. Because the closest thing that I can compare the Mikko Rantanen trade to is the Nolan Arenado trade. In terms of the shock value, in terms of, how the player was perceived here in Colorado and beloved. But here's the thing. Once Nolan went to the Cardinals, there would inevitably be games where the Rockies would play Nolan Arenado. But the idea that they would meet on a big stage of any sort was almost nothing. The thing about Mikko Rantanen ending up in Dallas is there is a chance, and it's a very good chance, because just last year the Avs played the Stars, and now they're going to play again, more than likely. And who's to say that this isn't going to be a matchup at some point in the Western Conference playoffs next year, and the year after that, and the year after that? I mean, isn't that Chris McFarland's plan here in the moves that he's made? Going for it now, but also looking out a little bit for the future? And Dallas, now having Mikko Rantanen for 8 years, Jake Ottinger still relatively young. They have Thomas Harley and Jason Robertson. They're not going anywhere. So I don't. Yesterday was significant because it was that first time. Obviously, the feelings are going to be at an all-time high. But we're going to keep doing this over and over again. It's going to happen a handful of times every year, plus an entire playoff series. So I don't know if yesterday was closure, but I think yesterday was a significant milestone just to, I don't want to say get it out of the way, because I think Mikko Rantanen looms too large in the franchise history of the Colorado Avalanche to just say one game, get through it, move on. Yesterday was an emotional day for everyone involved. And while I don't think the feelings will be quite as strong every time around, it will dissipate. It will become normal for Mikko Rantanen to be wearing those bright green sweaters and playing the Colorado Avalanche. And it will still be a storyline. It's going to be a storyline in that playoff series. And it will continue to be, but it will be less of one the more and more they play. But yesterday was a significant moment to get that first one, the tribute, to get that out of the way. You know, Gabriel Landeskog talked on the Spitting Chicklets podcast about how they were all going to go out to dinner on Saturday and hash hash some things out. I'll get to the outcome of that dinner shortly. Let's start with the reaction to Mikko Rantanen back at Ball Arena. I will say that I was surprised how little booing I heard. Now, maybe it was just because the cheers overwhelmed it, but I was kind of listening for it. I don't know about you. I was listening more for the boos. So I feel like if there was a lot, I would have easily heard it. I heard a lot of cheering. That's what I heard. And kudos to Avs fans. And maybe, Dallas is always well represented at Ball Arena. Maybe they help tip the scales in that direction. But I think it was the right move. If you were a fan at Ball Arena yesterday cheering for Mikko Rantanen, I don't want to tell fans how to fan, but it feels like the right call. If you're booing, I just think you're predisposed, like you just want to boo things. Like you enjoy it, so you're going to no matter what. I think the more appropriate reception for Mikko Rantanen to get was a warm welcome back and an ovation worthy of a guy who meant so much to the organization. And by the way, is not on the other side. He's not on that other bench because he wanted to be. We can't forget that. It was the Avalanche's choice. So I thought that the reception that he got after the tribute video was the right ovation. And after this, you can just sit on your hands. I don't think the next time that Mikko Rantanen comes to Ball Arena, especially since it'll be in a playoff series, that Avalanche fans need to cheer the guy. I don't ever think that there will be a point, unless Mikko Rantanen puts Cale Makar face first into the boards, that there's going to be a time where booing Mikko Rantanen is appropriate. If he puts Cale Makar face first into the boards, then you have my blessing to boo the bejesus out of the guy every time he touches the puck from now until the end of time. But he doesn't have to get that kind of reception every single time he shows back up. It was just the first one. Let's acknowledge what he meant to the organization. And you could tell after the game that it meant a lot to Mikko Rantanen to get that kind of reception.
First time especially, it's always going to be the most emotional and obviously the video and reception from the fans, I'll never forget that, the fans are on my back for 10 years, so it means a lot, so thank you.
And you could tell there was some emotion coming out of Mikko Rantanen in that moment. When he's on the bench, that tribute video plays, he gets the ovation. At the very least, if you're not buying into the idea that this was the Avalanche choosing voluntarily to move on from Mikko Rantanen, at least you can maybe empathize with Mikko on a level of, I've made a huge mistake. Like, if you don't believe that if you put it on Mikko Rantanen that all of this happened, which I'm not one to, but if you are, at least empathize with the guy that maybe he regrets some of his decisions. But again, this was the Avalanche. This was the Avalanche voluntarily moving on from him. But clearly Colorado means a lot to him. And it was kind of cool to see. It was cool to see the ovation. The video was very well done, and And it was kind of cool to see that emotion come out of Mikko Rantanen. And he only had the one assist. And maybe the perfect ending to the day is that the Avalanche ultimately prevail. Right? But that sequence where Scott Wedgwood denied Mikko Rantanen, what was it, 3 times right on the doorstep? Like, you don't have to root for the guy. So you can enjoy the fact that Scott Wedgwood denied him thrice on the doorstep yesterday in a crucial juncture of that hockey game. He's playing for an arch rival, and make no mistake about it, Dallas is the arch rival of the Colorado Avalanche now. Did you see the video that Dallas put out on social media yesterday? Oh, they wanted the smoke. They were hyping it up. They called the video the next chapter of the rivalry or something like that, and showed all these highlights of Mikko Rantanen in an Avs sweater. And they're like, and now Mikko Rantanen's on our side. And it shows him scoring for the Dallas Stars. Like, Dallas wants this. I think Colorado wants this. I think you, as an Avs fan, maybe don't love that Mikko Rantanen's there, but some part of you is like, yeah, this is going to hype it up even more. As far as this supposed dinner, now, if you didn't hear last week on the Spit and Chicklets podcast, Gabriel Landeskog was on, and I watched the podcast. I listened to the podcast, but I just happened to have, when it dropped, I happened to have social media open, so I saw the link to the YouTube video, so I went and watched it. When I saw Gabriel Landeskog saying, like, we got to hash this out over dinner and we're going to make him pay for dinner and all this kind of stuff, I could tell that Gabriel Landeskog was being a little sarcastic. But after the game, Cale Makar was asked about the idea that there needed to be some sort of hashing out things with Mikko Rantanen after the way everything went down.
I didn't see that quote. Somebody told me about that. I don't know if that was just like being funny or whatever, but no, it's just nothing to be hashed out. He's an amazing guy, and we all love him, and I know he loves us too. So,
yeah, I think as time goes on, I think we're getting a clear picture of what went on here. And I think should be no animus from the Avalanche side. Disappointment, maybe. Missing the guy a little bit, sure. But I think everyone is now kind of on the same page about what actually happened and who actually wanted out of this, if you want to call it marriage. And it's going to make things interesting. Certainly, it's going to make things interesting. And I thought, too, if not for getting a little nervy there in that third period, think about the goals that the Avs scored before they ultimately had to go to overtime to win. You have the guy that replaced Mikko Rantanen scoring the first goal. Marty Necas redirected the shot out front of Jake Ottinger. And then you get Valeri Nichushkin scoring a goal because, again, I stress that I think what went into the thinking of Chris McFarland is I'll get Necas, but if I also have Nichushkin, I think that's what he was banking on. So you get Necas and Nichushkin scoring 2 of the goals yesterday to jump on the Dallas Stars. that had a chance to go exactly the way that the Avalanche would have liked. You're dominating the game. Mikko Rantanen's replacement scores a goal, and the guy that maybe in a way you chose over Mikko Rantanen. I mean, is that fair to say? I think it is, that the Avs chose Valeri Nichushkin over Mikko Rantanen. Was certainly looking good. You dominate the game. Those guys score the goals. But, yeah, certainly yesterday, you're going to remember that game. And it's going to be a little less weird. It's going to be a little less emotional for all parties involved every time Colorado and Dallas meets up. But the idea that you had to get to yesterday and then it's over and done with, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think it's going to take longer than that. Take your thoughts on it. 719-24-7. 13-13. Coming up next, I want to get into what the selection committee did yesterday. Normally, I'm not a guy that is a bleeding heart for teams 69, 70, and 71 because of a variety of reasons. I'm just not that guy. I'm not going to pound the desk over, a team being left out of already a field of too many teams, if you ask me, in the NCAA tournament. But when there's the thing that went on yesterday, I feel like, I need to talk about it. And then we'll get into CSU as well as they finish the job in the Mountain West tournament and why I think they're not just holding up the mantle for Fort Collins or the state of Colorado, but for their conference as well. Join me this Wednesday at Trainwreck in downtown Colorado Springs. I'll be broadcasting this show live at 3. Come enjoy great food, drinks, and 2 acres of indoor and outdoor entertainment. And then we'll put the finishing touches on our respective brackets. That's Trainwreck, just a couple blocks south of Widener Field, this Wednesday afternoon at 3. Speaking of the tournament, now I will again restate that I long ago decided I can't do it. There are some debates in sports, and I get it. Maybe I'm derelict in my duty as a sports talk show host to not be up in arms the day after an NCAA tournament bracket is revealed, to be hooting and hollering about a team that did not get in. I think that already there are too many teams in the NCAA tournament. I'm sorry. It's funny not to get too sidetracked here, but I'm going to. Heading to the airport in Vegas, my Uber driver, upon hearing why I was in town, gave me his idea to essentially abolish conference tournaments and just the top 4 teams in each conference all get into the tournament. And I'll give him credit. It's a solution or an idea that I had not heard before. I did not like much else about it, but A for creativity. I am not somebody that thinks we should expand the tournament. I don't. So I can't be in my mind, I can't be anti-expansion and then be crying foul when Team X or Team Y gets left out of the already expanded field. I just feel like those two things run counter to one another. It's being a little disingenuous, I think, to my feeling. But what happened yesterday, there's something else to this. And I identified it on Friday. I said that I hope that CSU winning the Mountain West tournament and getting that automatic bid would then steal a bid from North Carolina, because I saw it coming that North Carolina was going to get in. And all I thought was, at the time, it was the brand. Right? That's all I was really thinking at the time. So I didn't fully get into everything that happened yesterday. But my thought was, they're going to find every excuse they can to get North Carolina in this field. So I was going to relish the idea that CSU would be getting in over a wholly undeserving North Carolina team. But much to my dismay, the team that CSU's Mountain West automatic bid came at the expense of was the team that they beat in the Mountain West championship. They did not steal a bid from North Carolina. They stole a bid from Boise State. Now, there are other, West Virginia, Indiana, there are other, but to me, looking at last 4 in, first 4 out, to me, it looks like if Boise State wins, I think that it was a zero-sum game. Either CSU was getting into the tournament or Boise State was getting into the tournament, because the selection committee would be darned if they were going to keep UNC out. And lo and behold, that's what happened. And I don't agree with it. And that would have been the end of my take. I would have said Boise State had the better resume, 3 quad 1 wins, while North Carolina only has 1. In fact, Boise State has beaten more ACC teams that are in this tournament field than North Carolina has during the regular season. Boise State has a better resume than North Carolina. But I thought the North Carolina brand is bigger than the Boise State brand, and the ACC brand is bigger than the Mountain West brand. And then I would talk about how the Mountain West, with very rare exceptions over the last few years, does not pay back the selection committee for the number of bids that they get. How many years do we talk about the Mountain West? Look at all the teams they have in, and they're all gone by Saturday. So I was going to say that's probably what it was about. I don't agree with it, but there's my rationale. Well, that's not all that there is. When you realize, and maybe I should have known this, I did not know that Bubba Cunningham was the selection committee chair. I didn't know who the selection committee chair was. But once I realized that the head of the selection committee was not wearing a Tar Heel blue tie because it makes his eyes pop, then I thought that there was something else going on that I don't like. And it's even worse than just picking the brand of North Carolina. Bubba Cunningham, chairman of the selection committee, is also the athletic director at North Carolina. Now, they'll tell you, and I have told you if you've been listening, that he has to recuse himself, as any current AD that's on the selection committee has to. They have to recuse themselves. They don't get to participate in when they're discussing the viability of their school being in the tournament. And they can tell you that and tell me that till they're blue in the face, Tar Heel blue in the face, or even Blue Devil blue in the face. You cannot tell me that the tie didn't go to North Carolina because of the color of tie Bubba Cunningham was wearing. Which, by the way, dude, do you have to wear your school colors? Do you have to? Does all he have is just a tie rack full of Carolina blue? Can you not just pick a different tie just for today to at least give the illusion that you are not rooting or representing? At the very least, representing. You're a member of the selection committee. Can you at least put on a different color tie? You can't tell me, and I'm not making the claim that you think I'm making, because it's like collusion in the NFL. Remember the number of times, I think Colin Kaepernick was like the most famous example of this. But the idea that NFL owners were colluding, right? And every time I say the word colluding, I think of Nick Kroll's character on The League, where he always cries collusion in their fantasy football league. But it's very hard to prove collusion. And there is a difference between collusion and just a bunch of people being of like mind. And I think in so many times that the NFL has been accused of collusion, I just think you get a bunch of people that are all kind of cut from the same cloth. They're all going to kind of agree on the same thing, and they don't have to send out emails or text messages, which would cross the line into collusion. They're just all kind of the same mind. And is that colluding? So collusion is very difficult to prove. And I'm not saying that the committee, when Bubba Cunningham was out of the room, said, hey, did you know that Bubba, our colleague and maybe friend Bubba, gets $70,000 in a bonus if North Carolina makes the tournament? Which he does, by the way, according to Reuters. I'm not saying that any of those kind of discussions took place, but his mere presence on that committee, you don't think at least subconsciously broke a tie? It doesn't even have to be stated. Just, I think that the selection committee, any selection committee member, can say to you with a straight face and would pass a polygraph that they did not choose North Carolina because Bubba Cunningham was the selection committee chairman. They would pass a lie detector test because I think they believe it. But there are so many subconscious factors that go into this, and you're just like, his presence and him being there, there's no way that it didn't help North Carolina in some way, shape, or form. I just refuse to believe that when North Carolina, right on the cut line, I mean, they were right there on the cut line, that him being on that committee influenced at least one or two of the selection committee members, even at the most subconscious level. And it's a problem. Aren't there enough ball knowers in the world? Do we have to enlist the help of athletic directors that would have a clear conflict of interest? Are there not enough people? Can we not get Ken Pomeroy to just basically do everything himself? I mean, that's all we all go off of anyway. The Ken Pom. Can he just all do it? Can he just tell us who's in the tournament? And if you think I'm being a wackadoo about this, let me propose another idea that I think we can all agree on. Why can't we be in that room? This isn't Trump and Zelensky meeting about the Ukraine war. This is sports. Why can't we be in the room? Why can't we have that transparency? Is it because people's feelings are going to get hurt? I don't understand. And this applies to the football committee too. Why can't we be in there? Why can't we watch this? This isn't a legal process here. This is an entertainment product. Let us in. If you're so sure that Bubba Cunningham's presence had nothing to do with North Carolina getting essentially the last spot in the tournament, then just let us hear what you had to say. And they can't, because the only thing that would work is if we were in there in the room at the time. Because I can't tell you, and I listened to both the men's and there's problems with the women's side. I mean, just as an aside, how in the world are you going to put USC and UConn in the same region? Like, how is that allowed? But anyway, that's a topic for another time. But is it just me, or does every time someone from the selection committee, for whether it be football, whether it be men's basketball, women's basketball, steps to a microphone or goes in front of a television camera and tries to rationalize why they did what they did, I always come away going, what? It never makes any sense. They can never properly articulate why they chose somebody. And it's always, right, well, what about, quad one wins? Boise State has more than North Carolina. Did that not come into play? Did the fact, and I know that they don't take this into account, is the fact that North Carolina was only in the position they're in by the grace of Cooper Flagg's sprained ankle? Like, do they not take into account? Do they not watch the games and go, we're going to put in this North Carolina team? That's why I say, aren't there enough ball knowers out there that they could put them in the room? People that cover the sport? I mean, I know the media has its flaws, but I mean, if I'm betting on who watches more college basketball or more a range of teams in college basketball, I'll take the media over a group of ADs any day. And like AD's got a lot on their plate. I'm not saying they should, but there's just so much. This stinks. It just stinks. And yeah, maybe, I'm taking up the mantle for Boise State in the Mount West, but there's West Virginia has an argument. Indiana has an argument. But we saw it coming all last week. I wasn't Nostradamus. 100 people following college basketball could see it coming from a mile away that they were going to bend over backwards to get North Carolina in. And if anything, to me, they should have said, because of the way this is all going to look, if it's essentially a tie, nobody has a ironclad argument, right? If it's a tie, shouldn't the tie go to, well, you know what people are going to say? This North Carolina team has actually been kind of hot garbage all season long. They're really not. Nobody is going to shed a tear that North Carolina is not getting in. Maybe because of the optics, maybe they should go the other way and keep North Carolina out. Wouldn't that be a novel concept? Say, no, we're not going to reward the brand. We're not going to allow people to impugn on our character and our decision-making. We're just going to keep North Carolina out. It's not like they have a great case to be made to go into the tournament. So normally, again, I'm not, and it's going to work itself out. North Carolina is probably going to get smacked around. I don't know when they play, tomorrow or Wednesday. Probably get smacked around and this story will die down. But there'll be at least 70 grand sitting in Bubba Cunningham's bank account because of this. And it just stinks. The whole thing stinks. And it just brings into question how that committee is made up and how they might be influenced one way or another. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on that. The bigger story moving forward is obviously in these parts CSU. And why I think their run through the tournament, however long it might be, is very important to the school, to the state, and to their conference. Sticking with college basketball, and we'll get into the brackets and everything over the next couple of days. A reminder, I'll be at Trainwreck in downtown on Wednesday from 3 to 5. We could chat in person about our respective brackets, because I am not one that says you need to. I mean, if you're going to have one of the first four moving on, you should probably decide who that is. And I'll have my bracket tomorrow, but we can talk a little bit on Wednesday. But in other college basketball news, I got some good, some bad. Want to hear the good or the bad first? Let's go with the good, right? Let's go with the good. Announced today. Well, it was actually announced last night, shortly after the women's tournament bracket was put out. But Air Force, for just the second time, is invited to a postseason tournament. They will be in the women's NIT. And added bonus, they'll start the women's NIT at home this Friday night, 6:30 at Clune Arena. The story gets better. Not to be presumptuous. Got to bring their A game, no doubt about it. But their opponent, Utah Valley, they beat this year. So more good things. The idea that if Air Force plays their game, and I know they met their demise against Wyoming in that tournament, but I thought Air Force outplayed Wyoming for a large portion of that basketball game. The Air Force is playing really good basketball. And it's great to see them after this historic season where Stacey McIntyre has the most wins of any first-year head coach. Could not have envisioned a much better first season, and now you get a chance to play in the postseason. And I go back to, it's not the big dance, but I go back to something that I think it was Tom Crean. Was it Tom Crean? I think it was. I may be missing. But I remember a coach talking about how important it is to have another opportunity to coach and to play. And I remember the clip was in reference to some teams bowing out. In fact, South Alabama, I think, on the men's side, declined to play in the NIT, looked at it as an insult. I don't know that they're a program that can stand and say something like that. But I just think, look, we understand the pecking order. We understand what the tournament everyone's trying to get into. But the idea that for a program like Air Force that has come so far in its history to be able to, in a short amount of time from the last time they played in a postseason tournament, to play in another postseason tournament and have a good chance of going deep in that tournament. I think it's fantastic. I really do. And you can say, Ryan, you're biased because that's fine. Whatever. I'm happy for them. I'm happy for them. And I think it is absolutely noteworthy that this program, if you understand the history of it, to see how far they've come, and the fact that it wasn't that long ago that they were in their first postseason tournament, and now they're in their second. I want to watch out for the Falcons a little bit. If they win on Friday, they will play Washington State. And then so on and so forth through the women's NIT, much like the NCAA tournament. So that was really cool to see. Again, that'll be 6:30 on Friday night yes, the game will be carried on the radio, but go out to Clune. I mean, I get lots going on, but to be able to go out there, and it's the first time they weren't hosting. They had to go out to California the last time. They were going to host on Friday. So I'd really encourage you to be out at Clune and to be a part of that and to celebrate all that this team's accomplished. And hopefully it won't be their last game because Wyoming wasn't. So hopefully they get to play another day and another day and another day. But be a great opportunity to go out if you haven't had a chance to, or just a great opportunity to go out and support that team. That is a program that has made some phenomenal strides, but a pretty special team, this iteration of the Air Force Falcons. So that's 6:30. They'll play Utah Valley at Clune Arena. And then if they win, they will play Washington State next week. So that was awesome to see. I saw CU. The women got into the other postseason tournament, so they're going to be playing postseason basketball. Obviously, it hasn't been a great year across the board. CSU's men are kind of taking on the mantle for everybody in this state. But it's still cool to see CU women, Air Force's women, get a chance to play in a postseason tournament. Now, here's the potential. And I say it's bad. I get there's a legal aspect to this. I do. I understand. But I just read this headline from ESPN and I read the lead. And I'm just like, oh no, this is not going to fix the problem. This is going to exacerbate it. So the NCAA, up until now, has said that you can't negotiate NIL until you get to your new campus. Now, we can argue how effective it's been, but that's been the rule on the books. And now they're saying you don't have to do that anymore. And again, there's a legal aspect to this that I understand with the antitrust and everything like that. And it's part of more of the growing pains until eventually the NCAA gets to where they should have been a few years ago with compensation for their athletes and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know if this is bringing it to the light of day or just inviting more of like what Steve Alford was talking about the other day. If you haven't seen his clip, I think he spoke very eloquently on how a lot of coaches are okay with players getting compensated. But this isn't what it was supposed to be. And you have Dan Hurley talking about half of his team is already thinking about where they're going to transfer to so they could cash in on NIL. And here's the NCAA saying, if you were one of the few, and it probably was just a few, that were abiding by the rules and were just transferring for that better opportunity and then worrying about the money later, which I think for what it's worth would be the right way to do things. Now they're basically saying, you few holdouts that were actually adhering to the rule, now you don't have to. How is this going to make it better? And I think what it is these growing pains that are, again, a direct reflection on the NCAA and the university president's unwillingness to recognize that this was an inevitability, that they were going to have to start compensating their players. They're all very smart people. This didn't blindside them. They were willfully holding on to this antiquated notion of amateurism, and it just wasn't passing muster. But they held on to it for dear life. And then when one crack in the dam formed, then the whole thing burst, and then it was a bunch of unintended consequences and a lawless Wild West. I do still believe that in the near future it will get reined in and it will get figured out. But this is what happens. You have the NCAA now in a position that they are powerless. If you ever believe they have power in the first place, they are now certainly powerless to stop this freedom of movement and to stop colleges from trying to poach kids and entice them to go into the portal and luring them with NIL and all this kind of stuff that you see going on. This was never, nobody wanted this. Even the people who were proponents of athletes getting paid, like me, like apparently Steve Alford, didn't want it to look like this. But when you resist something, when you resist progress, and then you're forced into it, then you get a completely imperfect system. Whereas if you would have had some foresight, if you would have understood the way things were going and were an active participant in shepherding college athletics into the next era, maybe you could have controlled for some of these things. Maybe you could have put some guardrails in place that would have adhered to legal precedent. But they didn't want to do that. And now they're just getting their teeth kicked in. Every single time we hear some change about the NCAA, it's the NCAA and in universities getting their teeth kicked in and having less control and it being more of the Wild West. They have no one to blame but themselves. But I don't see how this thing that has come down today is actually going to make the problems that exist better. I think it'll just exacerbate them. On a different note, let's talk about feeling your best. If you don't feel that same energy, strength, maybe you're feeling moody or it seems like you've lost your drive with your partner, it could be low testosterone. Testosterone therapy may be the answer, and you'll find true experts at Low T Center because they've been doing this and specializing in this for decades. Getting tested is fast and easy, like 20 minutes, you'll know. And if it is low testosterone, know that you should not settle for a standard dosage TRT plan. The science has evolved. It can be tailored to your needs, to your lifestyle. And that's what Low T Center does. So get personalized therapy at Low T Center. Go to lowtcenter.com to book an appointment. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. Hello there. Welcome in Drive Time Sports. Pleasure to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, streaming the show online at extrasports1300.com, listening through the app, or watching on our social media platforms. Got to tell 6 o'clock, Nuggets and Warriors coming up at 8 here on Extra Sports 1300. If you want to get in touch with me and give your take on the day's topics, maybe which on the topics that are driving the show, which I'll get to shortly, 719-247-1313 is the number to call or text it in. Now, as promised, here are the 3 stories that are driving the show. All right, let's start. Kind of 2 similar endings to games over the weekend. One good, one not so good. Let's start with the good one. Here's story number 1.
Now Cale Makar sees an opening. Makar cuts to the middle. Makar, he scores! Oh, hail Cale! It's a 3-point day for the great number 8. And you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here because this party is over.
Connor McGahee on the call for the Altitude Radio Network. You heard it right here on Extra Sports 1300 yesterday as the Avalanche win the long-anticipated return of Mikko Rantanen to Ball Arena as a member of the Dallas Stars. But if you watched the majority of the game, you didn't think it would come down to overtime. Avalanche dominated that hockey game for the vast majority of it. And in just a short little span, less than a minute, we were all tied up. It can happen that quickly. And in that way, it was actually a perfect primer for what looks to be an inevitable first-round matchup between Dallas and Colorado. Because if the Avalanche have had a weakness, a way that you beat Colorado, I think would be a better way of putting it. You got to capitalize on their mistakes, and they will be few and far between, but you must capitalize on them. And we've seen in the last 2 playoff runs that teams have been successful in that, including Dallas, by the way. So it's, even though that sequence was a little bit nutty and a little bit fluky when one of the times the Avs were trying to clear the puck, it hit the referee, which led to the Stars scoring a goal, but it was still the Avs not clearing the puck. You got to make sure. I don't care if the Great Wall of China is sitting in front of you. You got to get the puck out of the zone. And the Avs didn't do that. And Dallas, as they have in the past, pounced on those mistakes. And in a game that they had no business even being in, considering how the Avs dictated that the entirety of that game, they were right there with the chance to win it. But the Avs, in the way they scored their goals, also very similar to how I think they're going to have to score goals in the playoffs. First one was a redirect, right? Marty Necas in front of the net, redirected it. No chance for Jake Ottinger. Second one, Brock Nelson completely screened out Jake Ottinger. Couldn't even see the puck. Jonathan Drouin's was a snipe as beautiful as you'll ever see. And then Cale Makar was just being Cale Makar in overtime. The vast majority of goals the Avs are going to score against the Stars or any other team they may meet up with in the playoffs are going to fall under some of those categories. Probably the manufacturing, the dirty goals, the redirects, the screening out. And that's been a question sometimes with this Avs team is, do they rely too much on their superior skill and speed and puck handling abilities when they should just be crashing the net and getting as many bodies into those dirty areas as they can? And I thought the Avs did a really good job of doing that yesterday. So it was a great appetizer, if you will, for what this series is going to be. The Mikko Rantanen of it all, but also how these two teams meet stylistically. I don't know if I say after yesterday that you need to pick the Avs to beat the Stars in a 7-game series. I got to know what the status of Miro Heiskanen is. But I know they're going to have a goaltender advantage with Jake Ottinger, and I know you don't beat playoff Jake Ottinger unless you get in the dirty areas and make it difficult on him. So I thought it was a good sign that this Avs team, as new as they all are, still understands what it will take. And will they be able to do that consistently through a 7-game series against the Dallas Stars, a team that has feasted on Avalanche mistakes almost every chance they get over the past couple of seasons. But if they would have lost that game yesterday, oh boy, especially the way that they dominated that game, that would have been a bitter pill. But thanks to Kale, he'll say they got lucky in overtime. I say they have number 8, and that helps. Now, here's the flip side of a game-winning shot, story number 2.
And here we go. 5 seconds left. They're looking for the game winner. Inbound goes to Jordan Poole. Deep 3. Got it! 1.8 to go. Inbound Jokic from 70 feet. Missed it at the horn. And here's a sentence I didn't think I was going to say this year. The Denver Nuggets get swept by the Washington Wizards. Final tonight from Denver, 126 to 123. Ouch!
Jason Kosminski on the call for Altitude Radio. Ouch is right. It is March 17th. That game took place on March 15th. It is too late in the season for the Nuggets to be dropping a game like that. This isn't November, the last time they lost to Washington. Okay, it's go time. Right? And all this talk about where the Nuggets are going to end up. See, I don't want Michael Malone to wear out Nikola Jokic to chase a number 2 seed or number 3 seed. They should be able to get there just based on the quality of teams they have remaining on their schedule, like the Washington Wizards. They shouldn't need to push themselves to their physical limits in order to beat Jordan freaking Poole in the Washington Wizards. But for the second time this season, the Nuggets are questioning everything about themselves, as they should. It is unacceptable. It is borderline incomprehensible that the Denver Nuggets at this stage of the season would lose to the Washington Wizards. But now you look at the game the night before with the Lakers, and you're like, well, all of a sudden, the saying a win is a win is a win doesn't really apply, because you had the same level of effort the night before, and it took Russell Westbrook stealing an inbounds pass in order to beat the Lakers, who did not have LeBron or Luka. This team is messing around too much at a crucial point in their schedule. And again, you have to ask the question, and it's not just me, it's Michael Malone. This team continues to not be nearly good enough at defending 3-point shots. Now, and I'm not even talking about Jordan Poole. That was a ridiculous shot that he made. It shouldn't even been at that point. The Wizards should not have had a chance to win the game at any point after the opening tip. The Nuggets have much bigger plans. They should dispatch the Wizards by halftime. But the Jordan Poole shot is kind of a good reminder of what ails the Denver Nuggets. They can't defend the three-point arc in a league that is becoming more and more reliant on three-point shooting. And I'm actually more optimistic because I'm thinking that maybe this finally will snap the Nuggets out of it, this idea that they are just as good as they were 2 years ago, or that the West is what it was 2 years ago. The West is better and the Nuggets are worse. Those are just facts. It doesn't mean it has to lead to the Nuggets not coming out of the West, but those are facts. The West is better than it was 2 years ago. The Nuggets are worse. So the optimism that I hold is that maybe a second loss to the Washington Wizards will finally make it truly sink in. But if you listen to Nikola Jokic, I don't know that he's nearly as optimistic as I am.
Like we cannot have that comfort zone that we can just go in and playoff because I think we are not playing good. I think we are lucky that we are third or whatever we are standing, or we are not playing good. But hopefully we're gonna figure it out somehow, or not.
It gets me. Or not. Remains to be seen. First game of the rest of the Nuggets' lives tonight at 8 in San Francisco against Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond. Story number 3. In a year that has been overall quite difficult for men's college basketball in the state of Colorado, there's a shiny beacon of hope in the CSU Rams, who finished the job on Saturday, beating Boise State to win the Mount West and getting an automatic bid to the NCAA tournament, and they are in the juiciest of spots. They are a 12, right? There's one every year, 12 over a 5. Will that be CSU against Memphis? I will tell you right now, unless some piece of evidence comes to light, and I'm going to really dig in even more to the bracket tonight, but unless I'm presented with some compelling evidence to the contrary, I'm taking CSU. And I think one win may not be the limit for this team, led by Colorado Springs' own Nick Clifford. The way they are playing, how dominant. Like, it's one thing that they've just won as much as they have, with a 9-10 straight wins. It's not just that they keep winning. I watched the game against Utah State. It was a laugher by halftime. And Utah State's pretty good. The Rams are dominating during this winning streak. And Nick Clifford is playing, again, more praise being showered upon Nick Clifford. He's going to be a nationally recognized player when this tournament begins on Thursday. People are going to know him. And hopefully they'll be able to see him for themselves for at least a full weekend. But I think this CSU Rams run, and I get it, it's a little bit based on locale, but the way that Nick Clifford is playing, you look at some of the numbers and some of the metrics, and you could say he's playing right now like one of the 5 best players in college basketball. He is. That's how good he has been. And you think about him potentially being one of the stories of the first weekend. But then you have the rumors swirling around Niko Medved's future in Fort Collins. Could he be leaving for a bigger job after this is over? And then down on the list a little bit, but still I think significant, is, One run to the Final Four by San Diego State is not enough for many people to take the Mountain West seriously in the national scope of things. Right? I saw a lot of people just say, well, that's San Diego State. That's not about the Mountain West. Well, here's a chance for another Mountain West team to kind of take that mantle. And I know they're not alone, but as the champs of that conference, they have a chance to take the mantle of this Mountain West conference and make sure that this weekend doesn't end the way so many have for the Mountain West, which is they got in multiple teams and none of them have advanced past weekend number one. And I think the CSU team absolutely has the chance for us to be talking about them and getting ready for more Rams games next week. 719-247-1313. Take your thoughts on the three stories that are driving the show. Coming up next, guess who was skating with the Avalanche today and looking good while doing it? Oh, man. The tease of all teases. Not me, Gabriel Landeskog. Talk about it next. Think you have the luck of the Irish? Enter to win our pot full of cash. So this will be a St. Paddy's Day you'll never forget with $5,000 in our Luck of the Irish giveaway sponsored by Triple Crown Casinos. Head to extrasports1300.com now to enter this national contest for your chance to win. And I don't want to direct you on when you should do that, but considering today is St. Patrick's Day, sooner rather than later would be good if you would like to enter that national contest. Before we move on, it takes a big man to admit his mistakes, and I am that big man. I saw a headline in passing on ESPN, and I misunderstood it. So me taking the ownership that I blame ESPN. So South Alabama did not turn down an NIT invite. They had it taken away from them. So my apologies to the Jaguars and everybody associated with South Alabama. They had their NIT invitation revoked. And apparently it's they were informed Sunday evening that they had been invited to the NIT because of UC Riverside declining its invitation. And apparently UC Riverside then came back and said, JK, we're not going to the CBI, we're going to NIT. And now South Alabama doesn't get to go to the NIT. So my apologies. But still what I said about that, because there are teams that decline invitations to the NIT. South Alabama, not one of them. UC Riverside, one of them, although they were opting to play in another postseason tournament. But the point is, even if it's not the big one, I think there's something to be celebrated, something positive and about being able to play in a postseason basketball tournament. Like Air Force's women are going to do on Friday night at 6:30 at Clune Arena. And I don't know South Alabama's history, but they apparently welcomed NIT. They're like, bring it on. We would love to. And just with name recognition, I don't recall South Alabama getting to play a lot of postseason basketball. So that sucks for them. That they were willing and wanting to participate and give their student athletes another chance to play college basketball, their coaches another chance to coach, fans another chance to cheer, all that stuff, and to have it taken away. That is too bad. So I know this isn't a publicity stunt. Okay, let me just get that out of the way right off the top. Okay, all this that's going on with Gabriel Landeskog in the documentary about his recovery, none of this is just knowing Gabriel Landeskog. This isn't self-indulgent. This isn't him trying to profit or him trying to, garner the undying love from the masses or anything like that. I think he's documenting all of this for himself, first and foremost, because that was the impetus of it. He just wanted to document what was going on, his recovery from this freak injury and from this rare surgical procedure. And I think his ultimate goal is to come back and play for the Colorado Avalanche. So just in case anything I say from here on out makes it seem like I'm accusing Gabriel Landeskog of teasing everyone in order to get viewers on his documentary, I in no way, shape, or form believe that I know Gabriel Landeskog, covered him long enough. Covered it. I know him through this lens of covering him enough to know that dude just wants to play hockey and to be back out there with his teammates. I know that. But this all seems a little, it's all very interesting, isn't it? So the documentary's out. And we all, whether it's a documentary, whether it's a feature film, we all want a happy ending. Right? That's what we expect from our movies. You know, once in a while, we can have an infinity war, but as long as we know that there's another movie coming, that this will all be resolved. Okay, we don't normally like movies to end on a low note. And the worst ending to Gabriel Landeskog's documentary is, I couldn't beat this thing, I'm retiring. It would be tragic if that was the case. But all this is going on, and it just, I don't blame, I'm not saying I'm there with some of these people, but I see why there are people connecting some dots here. And what happened today at Avalanche practice certainly helps make their case. A lot of people, because of the documentary, and I don't want to totally speak for them, and I'm not saying this is widely held as the reason, but there are some people that are saying, look, if this documentary is airing, they got to have a pretty good idea that he's going to come back out on the ice for the Colorado Avalanche, right? Again, going back to the happy ending thing. This documentary coming out, how much of a bummer would it be for Gabriel Landeskog to be more public about this recovery than he ever has been, only for the end result to be him retiring? So there are a lot of people saying this documentary is a buildup to Gabriel Landeskog game 1 against the Dallas Stars being out there on the ice. And if you're someone that believes that, then I'm jealous of you. I am, because I'm way too jaded. I'm capable of optimism, but just not a steady stream of optimism. I mean, you've been listening to me long enough to know that I'm not always the most positive about things. And perhaps in my next 40 years on this planet, I'll learn to be a little bit more optimistic. But there are people that think that this is building towards him returning. And today at Avalanche practice, Gabriel Landeskog was skating with the team. Not by himself, with the team. And the videos, he looks good. For what it is, right? For what it is, it's not him in an NHL game skating around. It's him in a practice, heavily controlled environment, but less controlled than him skating by himself. Even I got to say, look pretty good. Look pretty good. And he's going to continue to skate with the Avs during their upcoming road trip. While the documentary continues and while the Avalanche build towards their first round meeting with the Dallas Stars. I see why people are doing this. I see why the dots are being connected. I understand it. Where I have been at with Gabriel Landeskog for a very long time is I would rather be sitting here and saying, I don't think it's going to happen, and let him returning be one of the best stories that I'll have to talk about in Colorado sports outside of the championships that the Nuggets and the Avalanche have won. It's a story that I hope that I'm on the wrong side of. because there have been other times where I'm a little bit more optimistic and then it's, well, he's had a setback. And that's still possible here. Like, until he's back out on the ice in a game, it's not mission accomplished. That's his goal. He wants to play again in the NHL. So simply skating with his teammates, while that is significant, and I don't, off the top of my head, recall the last time that Gabriel Landeskog skated with the team at practice, at every step of his recovery, there have been setbacks. So who's to say that this one doesn't result in another setback? I know, a terrible way to look at the world. But I'm just taking all the evidence I have and coming up with my opinion. That's what I do. And I don't see it. I don't see the fairy tale ending. But I hope so much. I hope that I'm wrong. But if you're somebody that's been on the opposite side as me and you believe that Gabriel Landeskog will be back on the ice in an Avs sweater, then today was a good day for you. And I'm sure you could see them the videos all over social media. It'd probably be easier if I retweeted one. But if you're an Avs fan, probably you're following somebody who tweeted it out today because it was significant in many people's minds. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. I hope this, where the Avs and Gabriel Landeskog go from here, meeting that they have to have this offseason, is after Gabriel Landeskog was back out on the ice. And not, you ran out of time again. And what do we do now? Uh, 719-247-1313. Last call for your text or phone calls on this Monday. Coming up next, another great idea by Deion Sanders that somehow I'm sure people will find a way to not like it and think it's the worst thing in the history of college football, but I'll present it to you and you can decide next on Extra Sports 1300. What are you doing Wednesday? Want to come out to Trainwreck with me? Couple blocks south of Widener Field. I'll be doing the show from 3 to 5, leading into the second half of the first 4. Bring some Switchbacks tickets to give away, maybe some other goodies. Still working on all of that, but if you want to watch the first 4, how about a stadium-sized television to watch it on? Great food and drinks, 2 acres worth of indoor and outdoor entertainment, golf simulators and backyard games and all sorts of stuff. Really, if you haven't, even if you don't come out on Wednesday, which it would be great if you did, but at some point, if you haven't been to Trainwreck, and they got sand volleyball. So much to do there. Great place to watch a game or games, as will be the case on Wednesday. So come by. We'll put the finishing touches on our brackets and chat it up a little bit. 3 to 5, Trainwreck, 812 South Sierra Madre, if you want to punch it into the old GPS. So Deion Sanders had an idea that I am 100% sure somebody will say is self-promotional and bad for the game of college football, because that's how most of Deion Sanders' takes are viewed. Although maybe we're beyond that. You know, maybe with a couple of years under his belt, with the strides that the program has made, I don't know, maybe there's more of an acceptance. I don't know. I'm looking at this idea and I say this is a dynamite idea. Somebody's got to explain to me why this isn't a bad idea. Why this is a bad idea, I should say. Deion Sanders wants to have CU spring game against another team. He would like to do it like the NFL does it, right? Which is part of Deion Sanders' whole thing, is that he's embracing the NFL-ication, if you will, of college football. Wants to bring some of the world that he knows very well into college football. And I think, for one, that is a dynamite idea. You know, coming up, it was big news that the Denver Broncos are going to be holding a joint practice with the San Francisco 49ers. And we look at these joint practices and what do we say? They're a better indicator of your progress, and they're a better way to get ready for the season than the early preseason games. And when you're practicing against your own team, why shouldn't college football do this? And he's not alone. Because the head ball coach at Syracuse, Fran Brown, posted on X, "We will come to Boulder for 3 days." So how about some CU Cuse action in April? And by the way, it is perfect that it's Syracuse, by the way, because everything that Fran Brown has done is like this whole mentality of anywhere, anytime, Syracuse will be ready, right? And that was headlined by them beating Miami and him saying essentially like, "You're welcome, Clemson," and all that. Like, he's trying to bring an attitude to a football program that has been largely been a joke. And I love it. I think it's perfect that it's Syracuse. Not for any geographic reason or any historical significance between CU and Syracuse, or at least there's not something that immediately comes to mind. I just think it's a coach in Fran Brown that's trying to, I think he's one of the people that's looking at what Deion Sanders is doing and trying to implement some things at Syracuse. But overall, just trying, I mean, they're both coming into a similar situation, right? How irrelevant has Syracuse football been? And Fran Brown's like, no, we want that stage. Give us that stage. We'll scrimmage you. Getting that publicity. Game's going to be on ESPN2, which, as far as the ESPNs go, is second to only ESPN. Not a bad stage to get onto in a time of year where college football is not in the national consciousness. I know a lot of regions, certainly in the South, are very into the spring game. But I've heard from my counterparts in other markets, like they're doing away with the spring game. They're closing it to the public. Like they're doing all these things where they're like, yeah, we're not going to make a whole spectacle out of it. And once again, here's Deion Sanders zigging while everyone else is zagging. He's like, we want to make this a bigger deal. Let's get another team in here. And let's do that. And Fran Brown saying, we'll be there. So let's get this thing. Look, if all these college basketball teams can make plans in 24 hours to get to, Greensboro and Seattle and get ready for all these postseason tournaments, surely Syracuse and CU can work this thing out in a month. I'll tell you from my perspective, I would be much more inclined to check out a spring game. Now, the first one with Deion Sanders, it's like everything, every press conference he did, every game, everything, every practice was something that you wanted to watch because it was a big deal that Deion Sanders is there. Some of the novelty has worn off. So now not every single thing that Deion Sanders does is newsworthy. But now here's something new and something different, and he's leading the charge, and I'm all for it. I don't think if I found the CU spring game, I might have it on for a little bit, but this certainly makes me more interested in it. Should do that. It'd be a controlled environment, right? Just like these joint practices are. But look at how people froth at the mouth over what happens in the NFL joint practices. It's all I've heard the last 5 years with the Denver Broncos is how they've dominated joint practice. And only this year has there actually been, you can even make some kind of correlation between that and how they played during the season. Give us any kind of football when we have none. We're going to embrace it. And if there's a way that you can make it feel bigger and feel more consequential than what you were normally doing in that part of the calendar, then even better. And see you doing it. Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I am all about it. Hopefully they can make it happen. Let's see. What else? Oh, tonight, Nuggets and Warriors. I knew this was going to happen with the Golden State Warriors when Jimmy Butler joined. I have not deviated. I thought that Jimmy Butler in the short term would be very good for the Golden State Warriors, and in the long term would be very bad. Still kind of feel like we're trending in that direction. But right now, the Warriors are playing great ball with Jimmy Butler. And right now, Jimmy Butler's been kind of, a passenger. Just kind of facilitating. He hasn't had one of those games where it's like, oh, Jimmy Butler took over tonight. For the Nuggets' sake, given everything they're going through, you sure hope it's not tonight. But if the season ended today, everyone's favorite phrase, it'd be Nuggets Warriors round one. So a game of some interest. Maybe your first chance to witness what's going on with Jimmy Butler at Golden State and maybe get a little bit of a playoff preview, and more than anything else, just seeing if the Nuggets are going to respond or what they're going to respond in some form or fashion. Like, they're playing a game. The game itself is going to be a response. It's just, is it going to be a good response or not? To a lot of the talk after that Wizards game. But like I said earlier, this is a interesting stretch. Another one of these, they don't come around very often. I guess it's kind of an extension of what we saw with the 2 OKC games and the Minnesota game. You know, they get Golden State tonight in San Francisco. They got the Lakers coming up. See what their health situation is like. They play the Rockets again, who right now hold the number 2 seed in the Western Conference. So they're, and then coming up before you know it, it's already March 17th, April 1st. I'm sure there's kind of some pun there with April Fool's Day. And I'll work on that and have one for you come April 1st. But Nuggets with their last chance before the postseason to face Minnesota, given how that season series has gone. Like I said earlier, every time you want to buy back into the Nuggets, and it's because of Nikola Jokic, right? You just think if he gets a little bit of help, that's enough against 95% of the teams in the NBA. It shouldn't be, I've talked about this before, it shouldn't be this difficult sometimes to win with the best player in the world. But the Nuggets really twist themselves into a pretzel trying to find ways to make it incredibly difficult to win, even while they have the best player in the world. Every time you see a little glimmer where you're like, all right, I'm back in, a game like Saturday happens. Or a game like Friday, if we're being honest about it. I wouldn't be patting myself on the back, thrown away. I'd be throwing away the crumpling up the box score and throwing it away like Michael Malone did. Not to say, hey, we won, that's all that matters. I'd be crumpling it up because I couldn't bear the thought of looking at it. So interesting one tonight. We'll see how it goes. Before I go, I want to leave you with a word from Low T Center. Mentioned a few times in the last few minutes. It's already March 17th. Meaning, what is taking you so long if you're not feeling your best? Get back to your best. If you don't feel that same energy, strength, maybe you're feeling moody or it seems you've lost your drive with your partner, could all be signs of low testosterone. The only way that you'll know is if you go into Low T Center and get your levels checked. And when you get them checked, and if it does happen to be low testosterone levels, just know you're in the very best place to get it treated. Don't settle for a standard dosage TRT program that you may find elsewhere. Low T Center is about personalized therapy. They'll tailor it to you. But that first step, booking the appointment, going in there, getting your levels checked, it all starts by going to lowtcenter.com. That's lowtcenter.com. Low T Center, reinventing men's healthcare. I appreciate your patronage. Enjoy Nuggets Warriors. And I will not do that anymore. And I will talk to you tomorrow at 3.